patience this morning. I'm here to answer any questions you may have about the incident, but I'll start by giving you a brief narrative right now about what occurred this morning. At 4:30 hours, we had a single call come in the fire dispatch center indicating that we had a building on fire at the 2302 Valdez Street address. First in units arrived approximately 5 minutes later, and at that time they saw heavy smoke billowing from the center of the structure. Immediately behind that was rapid flame extension, and the building became rapidly involved. Not nearly full engulfed, but rapidly involved. Our units actually summoned immediately based on the size of the building and the conditions they encountered, additional alarms to the third alarm right away. The fire quickly progressed. Moving forward, they actually activated a request for mutual aid. Units from Alameda County, Berkeley, and Albany all assisted to provide us with supplemental response to this incident, as well as provide backfill and coverage for our stations that were actually coming in to fight the incident. That being said, our first in units immediately saw the situation and decided that it was time to set up a defensive posture, and considering the scaffolding and the crane and the activity of the crane at that time, they decided that this was a definite hazard not only to the citizens but to the first responders. So they withdrew to a safe perimeter while they established master streams to fight the fire effectively. Our personnel engaged quickly and effectively to actually minimize exposures to the adjacent buildings, including the parking garage and several residential structures on all sides of the building. Because of their quick efforts, we were able to actually minimize the damage to those buildings to primarily radiant heat. In addition, because of the circumstances involving the crane and involving the fact that we had rapidly extending fire, the decision was made to evacuate the residents in all of those adjacent buildings. A 22-story structure right adjacent to the building, along with all of the perimeter housing around and surrounding the building itself that was on fire. At this time, there's a temporary evacuation center established at the Cathedral for at least 100 persons who have been temporarily displaced by this incident. We have other agencies such as the Alameda County Arson Investigation Task Force, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, American Red Cross, Alameda County Sheriff's Office, and those other agencies I indicated before that are currently assisting us with follow-through and investigation on this incident. If anyone has any questions at this time, I have myself, Battalion Chief Zoraida Diaz, who was the initial incident commander, to my right, and to my left, Deputy Chief Eric Logan, will all be available to answer questions you may have.
So, Chief, if we can first just talk about the size of this fire.
Sorry, if you can raise your hand and identify the outlet.
Christian Captain with KTVU Channel 2. Wondering if we could talk about the size of this fire, the impact that it had in the surrounding area, and then in particular about the crane. We were here, we were live earlier, and we saw that crane swinging around, and finally about the collapse that we saw as well.
Okay. I'm going to allow Battalion Chief Zoraida Diaz to speak to the majority of that, but I will say that based again on the size of this building and the size and the volume of fire that we encountered upon arrival, it was readily apparent that we had a major incident here, and so that's why we quickly summoned the additional resources up to a third alarm. Overall, we had roughly 80 personnel respond to this incident. We had a lot of flying embers that started permeating the area, much as what you might expect from building debris that's under construction that we've seen in past incidents. So that being said, I'll pass on the rest of the information to the first arriving individual on scene as the incident commander, Battalion Chief Zoraida Diaz.
Chief Diaz, if we could talk about the size of that fire, that crane swinging around, and that collapse that we saw as well.
Sure. So when we first arrived on scene, the first engine, as Chief White mentioned, arrived within 5 minutes of the call. And they reported, when they threw the ladder pipe up to the building, they reported that there was smoke on the roof. We then positioned another truck to the Valdez sides of the building and had them to take a topside view. They were able to identify that there was flames. So the flames and the fire spread significantly quickly, and so we knew automatically that we were going to have to go into defensive mode of operation. This is a 7-story building under construction. We've seen these types of incidents in the past, and based on that, those are the decisions that we were making. In addition to that, the neighboring buildings had to be evacuated because of the crane. We talked to Biggie representatives, and what they mentioned was that when the crane takes on that much heat, it starts to spin. So that was one of our major concerns fighting this fire, and it was something that we had to maintain situational awareness because we had companies who were operating near the collapse one point, we had to move them out of the collapse zone, approximately 150 feet, because we still had to operate and prevent the fire from spreading to adjacent buildings.
And then there was also a collapse, a portion of the building that collapsed.
Exactly. On 27th and, on 24th and Valdez, there was a partial collapse approximately 2 hours into the building, into the fire. The building was burning, as I mentioned, significantly. There was a lot of heat. Some of the buildings in the surrounding areas might have taken on some of that heat, and consequently, we had a collapse, a partial collapse. We notified all of our companies on the incident that we had a partial collapse, and made them aware of it. And our safety officer was just really effective in maintaining the perimeter and advising of us of any issues that we had.
And we have to ask if this is at all suspicious, since there's been a number of these large fires at ongoing construction sites. We had one in May, that same building had burned, I believe, previously in July, and then now this one. Is this suspicious, or is that something that you're going to be looking into?
Well, the fire is currently under investigation, as you can imagine. It's very early into the incident, so we're not able to make any determinations at this time.
Hey, go on this one. Just want us to say our name. Matt Beckler, KCBS. How long will the evacuations continue? And the damage to other buildings, was that limited to heat damage, or is there also burn damage?
As far as we can tell right now, it's radiant heat damage, and we have a structural engineer that's actually coming to assess those areas that we're concerned about. As far as the duration of evacuation, we're not really sure at this time. That's going to also factor in on how long it takes to actually remove and deconstruct the crane and stabilize it. So we'll have updates as time moves forward, and we have Cal Ocean, the crane operator, working together to assess the structural integrity of the crane and the plan moving forward to actually remove and deconstruct the crane.
Hey, Harry Harris of the Tribune. So all this, did they have to, we've been told they had security around this building and maybe video cameras, and there's a report of motion detectors being set off right before the fire started. Can you comment on that?
My understanding is that there was roving security patrols. I don't have any additional information about any available footage that may be available, but I believe the Alameda County Arson Investigation Task Force will be looking to combine all of that information and see what they can determine.
And how about the motion detector thing specifically?
I don't have any specific information, unfortunately.
Assistant Chief, can you also talk about evacuations again? I'm sorry.
Yes, the evacuations took place predominantly because of the radiant heat and because of the condition of the crane and the fact that it was spinning and it appeared to be unstable. And so everyone was evacuated within a few block radius of the area, in part because of that. And at this point, we have an evacuation center established at the Cathedral over on the corner of Grand and Harrison. And from what I understand, there's roughly 100 people there at that location at this time.
And what about the suspicious nature of the fire? What are you deeming it right now?
It's just deemed to be under investigation currently. As you can imagine, we're still in a position to try to put out all the hot spots and ensure that we can get in there safely at some point and then do an investigation.
How far along are you as far as containment, and what are some of the challenges for firefighters moving forward?
Again, please raise your hand and identify the
My name
outlet
is
you're from.
Pete Serratos. I'm with NBC.
Okay. As far as containment is concerned, as you can see, we have still a bit of volume of smoke, a little bit of active flame. I would estimate, just looking at it, we're roughly 85% or so contained. And the second part of your question, sir?
Challenges for firefighters.
Challenges right now are the same challenges we encountered early on, is that we have a lot of instability based on the scaffolding, based on the fact that you had a lot of burning materials in an elevated position, and the actual crane itself is a major concern. And so maintaining a safe perimeter not only for the citizens but for our first responders is a priority.
Amy Hollyfield, ABC 7 News. Everyone okay? Any injuries? How is the evacuation process?
Evacuation process, thanks to the efforts of the Oakland Police Department and others, went fairly smoothly from what I understand, as well as concerned neighbors who wanted to ensure that their neighbors were safe. And so my hat's off to the Oakland Police Department for their efforts to get involved quickly and to make sure that the residents and any affected business owners or other members were removed from the perimeter as quickly as possible. And the second part of your question, ma'am?
Any injuries?
No, we had 0 injuries.
Bob Riddell, NBC Bay Area News. Can you remind us about the other construction sites that have been on fire in Oakland past recent months, years? How many can you remember?
I can think of 2 to 3 right offhand. I think we had one around Lake Merritt, around the Athol Avenue area. Right. We had the event over on San Pablo, right at the border of Emeryville and Oakland on Avgar. Going a couple years back, we had the 7th Street BART station incident where we had a major development taking place there as well. So we've had a couple.
I've talked to a couple construction workers who work on this site, and their reaction was that they can't imagine that this is accidental. What's your response to that?
Well, I can only state that once I get some findings and some information, definitive information, whether it be from video footage and or the investigative team's assessment of the situation, I can't comment on it without knowing the facts.
Was there power?
I don't have that information.
That's no KPIX radio. Can you say more about the crane? Is it concerned it's going to collapse or break apart or melt, or what's the actual concern about the crane?
Well, right now we don't know what the condition of the crane is, so we've got assistance from the Alameda County Sheriff's Office to get an aerial view of what's going on and get a closer look without putting our people in the direct perimeter in the hazard zone. And so we're trying to glean from that footage and that information what we can about the status of the crane. But until you,
take a look at it, or
I'm sorry.
using a drone?
That's
to look
correct.
at it?
Yes, getting an aerial view of things. And I'm sorry, there was someone over here to the right that had a question that I didn't get a chance to.
Right here.
Okay.
So can you talk about the size of the response, the number of personnel and pieces of equipment, and what time you might have knocked it down at?
Knockdown time, if I'm estimating correctly, was approximately an hour ago. That's where you saw the massive volume of flame pretty much diminished.
Okay.
As far as number of individuals on scene, we had over 80 personnel respond on scene, and I'm going to guesstimate right now around 25 or 26 units or apparatus on scene.
Okay.
That included mutual aid units, our own fourth alarm response, as well as battalion chiefs, myself, the arson investigators, and more.
So it was a fourth alarm.
Yes.
All right, we're going to take one more question, then we will come back later. Anyone else?
What time are you coming back again?